Thank you for joining us today on the Human Engineering Podcast. Today, our sponsor is Curable Premium CBD. You can find them at kuribl.com. And we've got another great sponsor, Terry.
E7, ESVYN.com. Nice clothing line. They make all of our clothing apparel for our race teams in Indy, and we're doing a concert this weekend in LA, and I'm wearing one. So yeah, E7.com, ESVYN.com.
Great. And we'll talk more about these sponsors as time goes on. But thank you for joining us today on our podcast. I'm here with Terry Lyles. I'm Tim Braun. And the name of our podcast is Human Engineering. And we chose that because I thought it was pretty interesting how Terry came up with the whole human engineering theme for his practice. So Terry, let's dive right in. Let's talk about where human engineering came from.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. Look forward to it. I mean, I do a lot of podcasts as you do. This is an interesting one for us for a lot of reasons. And, for those people who don't know me, I have a PhD in psychology. I went through clinical psych training and then through sports science training. So I love sport. I grew up in Indianapolis around the racetrack at Indy, the world famous Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I was fortunate enough to get involved years ago with a driver and haven't stopped. So I've trained like 40 drivers in IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One, sports car, and love it. So several years ago, I was contacted by Dodge Motorsport, who ran the engine program for like 5 major teams in NASCAR. Richard Petty was one of those. Roger Penske was one of those. Ray Evernham was one of those, and then Robbie Gordon was the 4th, and then they farmed some engines out. So they made a lot of engines for a lot of carriers, all wearing Dodge badges, obviously. So I got a call one day from Dodge, and they said, "Hey, we want you to meet with this team." And Ray Evernham is the gentleman you'll be working with. And people don't know who Ray Evernham is. He was the crew chief for Jeff Gordon that won all those championships in the 90s. And he was the first non-driver to go into the Hall of Fame as a crew member, crew chief. So he's a Hall of Famer for NASCAR. So I sat down with him in Charlotte. They gave me like 20 minutes to talk with him, and I ended up staying there for about 2.5 hours. We had lunch. I ended up drawing on a whiteboard and just showing everything that we would do for the drivers, the crew members, the staff. And he asked me a basic question after I got started, and he was intrigued by what I did. And he says, "So what do you do? I mean, what is this really about?" And I said, "Ray, how many engineers do you have here at Evernham Motorsport?" He said, I've got like, 80 engineers and 1 PhD astrophysicist who runs the engineering crew. I go, "Great." I said, "How many human engineers do you have?" And he goes, I don't know what that is." I go, "That's what I do. I do the same thing to the chassis, the engine, and the aero package of the car that you do with that. But I just work with the driver to align him or herself with your engineering skills. And we bring an overall engineering capacity, which is car or machine, in this case, car, machine, and human being, the driver." So that's how it really came up, which was really kind of interesting. And after I left that day, I thought, well, I don't know, I think it went pretty well. But then I found out 2 days later in USA Today that he had hired me. I didn't even get a phone call. And my manager called and said, "You go get USA Today." And I went and got it. And sure enough, there's a whole article. It's on my wall behind me here. And, Evernham hires stress coach. So it's kind of cool. So that's how the whole human engineering thing started.
Well, and that I always love that story. And I think, the reason it's such a good theme for our podcast, Terry, is because I don't think people think about this a whole lot. I always think about, I'll take my car in, I'll get $300 worth of work done on it. But, I won't go to the doctor and get $300 of work done on myself unless I've got insurance to cover it. And it's really interesting on where we place our priorities based on what society has done, whether it's through different programs or different things. Sure. And, so what we want to focus on this podcast is really human engineering, doing what you did with the Everham Gillette race team, but doing it for everyday people and high performers in business and sports. And it isn't just, you know, talking about how to self-improve yourself and the psychology, but we're going to cover physical aspects and other things about engineering yourself and making yourself better.
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole concept I've been doing for 20 years. I mean, and it went from a concept from my dissertation with my PhD was on avoiding burnout. That was my whole process I was trying to figure out, you know, and prove. And what I found out through my dissertation was burnout was imminent when there was a lack of inner and outer alignment, which is mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. And those are like four wheels and tires on the same car. So who we are mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically all need to be aligned together to peak perform, to perform at our highest, best self. And it was so intriguing to me that I actually started Lyles Corporation because of that 20 years ago, 22 years ago now, because I began using it in the corporate world with athletes. And I'm like, look, there's something here that I can duplicate. So I've been training on this and working on it. And it's like you say, it's not just the psychological aspect, it's the physiological aspect, blood oxygen levels, how to run those blood oxygen levels, how to change oxygenation within 20 to 30 seconds under pressure. My latest book was called Performance Under Pressure. There's a whole series there that I get into the mechanics and the science of how you eat, how you rest, how you hydrate, how you sleep, how you cycle, how you breathe, how you visualize, how you meditate. There's a whole protocol that goes along with corporate athletes, as I call them, as well as physical trainers that are working with other performers and the professional athletes and amateur athletes that I work with now.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, you know, that goes along with engineering is maintenance. And one of the things that, you know, you and I have known each other almost 20 years, I think it is. And, you know, early on in my life, I bought a bunch of audio cassette tapes, you know, with, I went to, you know, a big motivational conference, and it was this Earl Nightingale set. And one of the things Earl Nightingale said, it was called The Strangest Secret. And, you know, the one thing that has stuck with me my whole life, you know, I listened to that 42 years ago. And the one thing that has stuck with me and where the maintenance piece came in was you said something similar 20 years ago to me when I was involved in a very stressful situation. And those two things have continued to stick with me, and I think have made the difference in everything I do. And what that was Earl Nightingale, one of his points and one of his things to remember and always do was when you're confronted with bad or tough news, don't think, oh no, it's the end of the world. Think, what's good about this? It's counterintuitive to think, you know, what's good about this? So, you know, I went through life and building a sales career that every time somebody called me up with a complaint or got product that was wrong, I kept saying, how can I make this a positive event? And it really served me well. And then I met you in another stressful time in my life, and you were talking about training Army Rangers and Navy SEALs and talking about, and this was, you know, when we, right after 9/11 and we had a lot of heroes, you know, all over the world on behalf of the United States and other countries. But you talked about first responders, military, Navy SEALs running towards the danger. And my mind flipped that to, okay, instead of running away from the bad news or the tough challenges you've got, run towards it and tackle it. And I think, you know, those are the types of things that, as we talk about human engineering, and then the maintenance is, you got to keep reminding yourself that. And those things, it's amazing to me after 40 some years, when I'm faced with some bad news like that or some challenging, your run towards the danger and what's good about this from Earl Nightingale are right on the top of my mind. I don't even think twice about it. it's like immediately, wait, you know, and I've got some crazy stories about that where, I lost a major account, said they weren't going to do business with my company anymore. And I was sitting with the CEO of the company and the VP of sales, and they looked at me and go, "What is going on?" And for whatever reason, I said, "Don't worry, everything's going to be great. This is just going to help us." And they thought I was absolutely crazy. 3 months later, that account that was going to leave us re-upped with us and gave us 3 times the amount of business.
Wow.
And, and I don't know if I should disclose this on here, but, the CEO of that company was Kevin O'Leary. So
Oh, wow.
on Shark
Yeah.
Tank.
Yeah.
So it's, how tough a character he is.
Sure.
And my company looked at that and said, geez, this O'Leary's a tough guy. And if he told us we're not going to have any business, we're not going to have any business. But I never looked at it that way. And I think the way I proceeded after that is what made all the difference with that account. And it's thanks to you and some of your human engineering that you did on me,
Sure.
so.
Yeah, no, and it's so true. I mean, I learned early on in school, this thing called fight flight response that we have, chemically in our body. And when stress hormones are released in our body, cortisol is the hormone and, the chemical itself, and it goes into our body within 15 to 20 seconds, our body reacts. If you've ever been cut off in traffic, which all of us have, if you've ever driven one day in your life, you dodge or you stop real quick, about 15, 20 seconds later, your heart speeds up and your stomach clenches and your eyes get bigger, and all this chemical transformation literally takes place, which I call emotional hijacking. And it's just natural. You can't stop the chemical release. But what we've learned in sports science is you can control the fluidity of how long you stay in that emotional chaotic state. And that starts with mind body. So but what you just said from Nightingale by saying, hey, look, I'm going to flip this coin and turn this into, hey, this is going to be great. And that's not just positive thinking, even though it is. There's a bigger picture there, because as you say something from your mind to your mouth to the existence in the world, your body literally changes chemical reaction with it. That's why affirmations are really so important. We call it psychological scripting in psychology. As we speak to our children as they grow up, we're basically scripting them on how to see the world. And we can either, push them down and shame them and I can't believe you did that again, or what are you thinking? Or we can say, hey, look, you did your best. We're going to do it better next time. Hey, great job. All of that makes a difference in the psychological development of human beings. So I created this system, as you mentioned, Navy SEALs and Rangers and people in the military. I've trained 10,000 fighter pilots for the Air Force, all in this stress training. And on the Air Force side, it was G-loading, how to keep the oxygen and blood levels correct, that it doesn't rush out of your head down to your stomach, because it's really not a good day to black out, at Mach 1 flying alone in an aircraft. So you have to stay alert. So there's a lot of breathing techniques that go along with that I write about. And for you that are watching a video, I have a coin, and it's a threat challenge response coin. So on this top side, it says threat, and that's anything that we are threatened by. It could be the weather, a human being, a spouse, a child, my coworker, anything. Anytime I'm threatened, that becomes bad stress. We don't eliminate that stress, we convert it. So it's called a threat challenge response. So I take that same coin and I flip it, and the threat becomes a challenge, which flips it from bad stress to good stress.
Yeah.
And that challenge response is so powerful. It makes all the difference in the world in how we see the world and how our body reacts to it.
Right. And there's, this isn't, like you said, just positive thinking and that type of thing that people kind of poo-poo. It's really science. And one of the things that we'll get into on a future podcast is your work with biometrics and some of the things you've got going on that, where you can see the exact response. I think the other thing that goes along with this is, I think there are so many things that I've picked up over the years, as I know you have, sayings from people. And
Sure.
One of the other things that I think goes right along with this, and you're right, it's not just positive thinking, because something changes when you change what you're thinking. And
Absolutely.
Wayne Dyer, one of his things that's always stuck with me that I've always tried to tell other people, and they always look at me with this blind stare, like, what are you talking about? Is he always used to say, change the way you look at things and the way things look change.
Absolutely.
And it absolutely does.
Yes.
You know, if it's the whole half empty, half full glass of water, if you look at it half empty, you're only going to see the negative and feel the negative things around that. Whereas if you look at it positive, there, call it positive thinking, call it whatever you want, but it changes your physiology, as you know,
no
from
question.
your work.
I was coaching a performer yesterday that had a glute injury, and in other words, they had a pain in the butt, and it was, she went to an acupuncturist, and she was working through that and did some chiropractic over the week. And I told her before she goes, I said, listen, you have to work with pain. Pain is negative energy trapped in the body. I said, you have to work to release the pain out of your body. And so when she went through the acupuncture, obviously she's in pain. And as the acupuncturist is actually applying the needles in the appropriate spots, and she lies there for a half an hour and then she rearranges them. I said, when you feel the pain, let your mind go to the pain and visualize that pain actually leaving your body. And it's so powerful. That's why the mind, we have now found out over 20 years. And listen, this study all came out of Harvard 45 years ago. This was being studied. And it was done by Dr. Herbert Benson, who's one of the world foremost writers on spiritual, physical, mental healing. I studied this guy. I interviewed him on radio broadcasts in Detroit years ago. He was on like once a month. Fascinating guy. And he was doing this 45 years ago at Harvard when no one even believed this stuff was real. But now we know, because science has caught up to those theories that he was one of the forerunners of. We now know you can prove it under microscopes. And like you said, with biometrics, we can now see the nervous system change in real time. But the last thing on the pain is you have to move toward the pain and then push the pain away, move it out of you. And by doing those exercises, it's amazing how the body literally recovers quicker, because the mind has so much capacity over the physiology. It literally works to help physiology work with itself.
That's fantastic. So, well, we're looking forward to a lot more on this podcast from great guests, from everything from athletes to business people to entrepreneurs who've started new businesses. And we'll be talking about a lot of new technology based, CBD and those types of things as well. Terry, why don't you tell us a little bit about your website and your books and what you've got going?
Yeah, Tim, I'm excited to be able to bring some of our friends on. We've got some very interesting friends that we both know, between us all. And I think people will be amazed at some of the people we bring on, and they share their stories and of healing and hurting and success and just all really cool things from across the gamut, as you mentioned. So you and I have been talking about this for a while. We're both very excited about it. So you can find me at terrylyles.com. It's pretty easy to find. TerryLyles.com. My books are there. Coaching opportunities are there. Feel free to hit us on this. I know we're going to have these loaded up on our YouTube channel, so you can find us on the YouTube channel that we're actually just putting together right now. So this is really new, but we're excited about it. So look us up on YouTube if you want to watch us and listen. And if not, you'll be able to tune in on the podcast and hear us verbally. And from e7.com, ESVYN.com for clothing, fashion, design, all. We just appreciate, and Curable, as you mentioned, Tim, these sponsors are great to us. We really appreciate everything they do, and we wouldn't be here without their support.
Yep. And be sure you go to the Curable website as well. It's a very interesting company based in Minnesota that is really one of the only seed to farm hemp companies, hemp CBD companies, that actually uses the whole plant for the products they're creating. There's very few companies that do that, but what seed to plant means is they own their own farm. They do all their own processing and manufacturing and all their testing. So we've got some exciting news about them coming up with the state of Minnesota here in a few weeks too, that we'll be sharing with you. But their website is KURIBL.com. Be sure to check that out. Until next week, it's Tim Braun here and Terry.
Look forward to it again, Tim. Thanks for the opportunity, and excited to get this thing started and going. And, I've done a lot of other podcasts on other shows, but it's fun when we can kind of play it together. We've done a lot of work
Right.
together, so I'm excited about it.
No,
Thank you.
I'm excited too. And there's a lot of great stories to tell and guests that we'll have on the shows
Sure.
coming up. So thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.